We arrived in the Emerald Isle of Ireland at the Dublin airport. We spent 2 weeks experiencing the beautiful landscapes, ancient monuments, castles, manors, monasteries, and cathedrals. Ireland is also the site of the modern miracle of the Titanic and the filming of the TV series Game of Thrones. We saw narrow roads, the Blarney Stone, and the sites involved in the Republic of Ireland's bid for freedom from England and other invaders. The population of Ireland is around 4.8 million, far less than it was historically before the potato famine in the middle 1800s. The island is the westernmost country in the European Union, yet it is divided, as 6 counties were retained by the United Kingdom as Northern Ireland. Ireland is about the size of Indiana. English is spoken all over Ireland, but the original Gaelic Irish language is coming back and is taught in all Irish Republic schools. There are Irish-only radio and television, as well as mandatory Irish and English on many official roads and regulatory signs. There are the remains of many previous civilizations, of which the oldest are the many Celtic monuments, one of which we saw in the Kerry southwest area. Christianity first came to Ireland in the early 400s AD, probably as a result of contact with Roman missionaries when Christianity was the state religion. St. Patrick was not the first, but is the most famous, and the St. Patrick's Cathedral in Dublin bears his name. The site was probably used for centuries before the cathedral was built around 1200. Inside are a well and gravestones believed to date back to St. Patrick's era. In any case, it is the largest church in Ireland. As Christianity spread, other churches and monasteries were built all over the island. This is the Glendalough Monastery, not far from Dublin. It is an early medieval monastic settlement founded by Saint Kevin in the 500s. Kevin, a descendant of one of the ruling tribal families, became known as a holy man. There are literally hundreds of old monastic houses on the island, almost all of which are in ruins, like Glendalough. The first Irish and Scottish languages go back to at least 200 AD. The English and the Catholic churches both actively discouraged Irish for a long time, but today, native-born university students at the National University of Ireland must pass a proficiency test in Irish It's also an official language of the European Union. There are numerous locations in Ireland where the Vikings raided and later settled in Ireland starting around 795 AD. These lords of the Isles held sway in Ireland and Scotland for centuries. Because of this, the tribal Irish families began building castles to protect themselves from the Norsemen and the Normans, and they are found all over the island. The Normans, descendants of the Vikings from Scandinavia, began building their own settlements all over the area, including Iceland, England, Scotland, Ireland, parts of northern France, and even parts of Africa. They were famous for their aggressive, warlike nature, invading and assimilating into the various cultures, usually in charge of the areas they took over. The most famous Norman was William the Conqueror, who became King of England in 1066. Yet, in all cases, the Normans, mostly in East Ireland, merged with the Irish and eventually became more Irish than the Irish, according to some historians.
This little photo, I won't open it up because it's quite large. His little map of the gardens, worth seeing.
In 1536, King Henry VIII decided to reconquer Ireland and rule it from London, naming himself as the King of Ireland. Henry put down the inevitable rebellion as well as several others. It took over a century, during which the English royalty carried out a policy of land confiscation and colonization known as the Plantation. Protestant settlers from Scotland and England were brought in to take over lands, while their Catholic owners were thrown out into the streets. Since only landowners could vote, the settlers became the ruling class. This was followed by new laws aimed at converting the Catholics of over 1,000 years into Anglicans, the new state religion instituted by Henry VIII. An Irish politician of the day, Edmund Burke, called it a machine of wise and elaborate contrivance, as well fitted for the oppression, impoverishment, and degradation of a people, and the debasement in them of human nature itself as has ever proceeded from the perverted ingenuity of man," unquote. Oliver Cromwell was given a free hand to deal with dissidents, referring to them as savages and undesirables. Thousands were forcibly shipped to the Caribbean as indentured slaves. Cromwell is regarded as near genocidal when it came to Irish Catholics. In 1798, after 250 years of such treatment, came the Irish Rebellion. The Irish lost, and Ireland was annexed to the United Kingdom. The native Irish remained powerless and in poverty. They got by with planting potatoes. Ireland is mostly farms and agricultural enterprises, but the English landowners sold to the highest bidder, often in England and overseas.
Thank you so much.
No problem at all. Thank you.
When the potato blight killed their main source of affordable food, hundreds of thousands died and even more left Ireland to emigrate to the United States. Almost half of the population of 8 million died or left. The British Crown was blamed for not helping much, as food produced was still shipped to the highest bidders elsewhere, including England. We visited Cove, the heritage site where most of the Irish immigrants left. It was also a memorial to the many who died of starvation. Also, the last place where the ill-fated Titanic was in port before heading out to the North Atlantic in 1912. The mostly absent landlords were permanent residents of England, but they controlled the politics of Ireland. Most of Ireland was Catholic, farming, and wanted self-rule. Only the Northeast, which was predominantly Protestant and industrial, wanted to stay with the British Crown. The First World War stymied progress toward independence, but from 1919 to 1921, the Irish Republic Army declared Ireland free from the UK and waged a guerrilla war against the British. A truce was signed in 1921, halting the war and creating the Irish Free State. But England kept the most prosperous 6 counties in the Northeast, as the Protestant majority landowners voted to opt out of the Irish Free State. Nobody was happy in the main of Ireland who wanted the entire island to be independent of England. In fact, in 1949, the Irish left the British Commonwealth. In the 1960s, the continued poor treatment of Catholics in Northern Ireland led to the Troubles. The country was reforming under new economic plans and began efforts to join the European Economic Community. Divorce was legalized, homosexuality decriminalized, and abortion allowed in limited cases. Major scandals to this day have resulted in a massive decline in religious practice. The Troubles in West Belfast and Derry, Northern Ireland, became violent as the Irish Republican Army fought discrimination against the Catholic minority in Northern Ireland. They complained of police brutality, voting requirements, lack of opportunity to get into good schools, and a general hatred of each other. From 1969 on, there were numerous riots, mass protests, and acts of civil disobedience. This led to strict segregation and no-go zones, which still exist today. More than 3,500 people were killed in the conflict, mostly civilians and British security forces. 16% were members of paramilitary groups who have since been memorialized. We crossed the bridge into the Catholic area of West Belfast for a walking tour with an IRA partisan who lived the Troubles. Note the high fences still in existence. This area is still a segregated area. The Catholics point out the many injustices that they have endured from the British landowners, justifying their long fight for better treatment. We then walk to the Protestant side, past the gates which lock at 7 p.m. each night. The police command center is there with street cameras to enforce the peace. Our guide here is a native of Belfast and a former British soldier who served during the time of the Troubles. The Protestants on Shankill Road still maintain a completely separate society with the 20-foot high 5-kilometer wall. The Protestant side also has memorial sites and focuses on the injustice they feel of being attacked for the system which has been in place for hundreds of years. Their families have been there since the plantation in the 1500s and remain loyal to England and the Queen of England. They want peace, but do not want any changes to the political situation. The peace wall is on the Protestant side. Most of Belfast gets along just fine, but West Belfast, a flashpoint for the Troubles, is still segregated. We've seen some of the intense beauty of this small island, but wanted to highlight several in particular. The first is the Ring of Kerry, a 112-mile coastal route in southwest Ireland. The pubs of Ireland often have good food, good spirits, and good native Irish music. Ireland is green pretty much year-round, making it perfect for raising cattle in some areas, sheep in others. We visited the Glen Keen Sheep Farm near Sligo for a demonstration on how farmers find and herd their sheep in mountainous terrain. Today was a very rainy day.
And then on command she would go to the left of the
Though agriculture is the main occupation of the Irish, they are also famous for several other things. The first is the making of crystal glassware in Waterford. Ireland has a number of famous writers, including Jonathan Swift, author of Gulliver's Travels, William Butler Yeats, an Irish poet and playwright, the first Irishman to win a Nobel Prize in Literature. Then there's Samuel Beckett, also a Nobel laureate. He wrote Waiting for Godot. And lastly, George Berkeley, a famous philosopher and namesake of the University of California, Berkeley campus. The British also made Belfast, north of Dublin and in Northern Ireland, an industrial centre, making linen and ships. Belfast is the home to a large freestanding museum telling the story of the largest ship afloat in 1912, which collided with an iceberg in the Atlantic, and more than 1,500 people died. Over 15,000 men worked on the Titanic and other ships. One of Northern Ireland's best-known exports today is the HBO TV series Game of Thrones. This fictional fantasy drama was filmed in studios in Belfast near the Titanic Museum and on many locations in Northern Ireland and elsewhere. They showcase the rugged beauty of Ireland's North Atlantic shores. Ireland is a phenomenal place to visit. Its beauty, rugged landscapes, historical sites dating back thousands of years, and its pivotal place in modern European politics all keep us glued to its journey through history. Many North Americans have Irish blood, and on St. Patrick's Day, every March 17th, aren't we all just a wee bit Irish?